Hey, it's Ghost with Combat Sports Supply, and today we're going to be going over quick change spring systems and how to use them. So the major difference between the two guns we're working on is the modern version of a quick change spring system versus the original version of a quick change spring system. So the modern version of the quick change is going to be an actual quick change. It's very quick. Doesn't require a ton of tools or experience. The original version of the quick change is going to require some work to get into and put back together, and we'll show that here in a minute. So both of the guns in front of us have quick change spring systems. There's one major difference between the two. This is going to be your normal buffer tube. This is going to be a more traditional AR style buffer tube with an actual castle nut, so you will need an AR wrench if you want to take one of those apart. First, we're going to go over the easy one because it doesn't take very long, and then later on we're going to go over the more traditional version of it so that you can see how to do it for yourself. You're going to want to first take the stock off. Sometimes you'll have to move this pin out of the way to get it all the way off. So I'm just going to use a flathead to get the additional leverage to pull it all the way out so the pin is detached and I can slide it completely off of the buffer tube. This style needs something to put in the pin so you can lift it all the way out. This one, you're just going to grab it and pull down instead of just doing this. Next, you're going to want to make sure your wiring harness is out of the way if it's rear wired. And then at the base of the buffer tube, there's going to be a Phillips screw way down in here. That's why you need a nice long screwdriver. And then you're going to unscrew it and take the buffer tube out. So you may need a flashlight to seat the screwdriver, but once you do, just unscrew that nut and bolt system in there. They're fairly long, so it takes a second. Then you can slide it apart. If you have an inline MOSFET, there is going to be an extra wire segment to it. You're going to want to unplug it. Up here are usually a pair of connectors that you can pop apart to take the wiring harness off so you're not breaking anything. So once you've got your wires disconnected on all ends, you're going to carefully pull your MOSFET wire out if it has one. Make sure you don't lose the screw down the tube because this is just on a plate that will fall all the way out. Set that aside, you're not going to need it for a while. So for the ones with an armorer's wrench, you will be loosening that castle nut almost all the way off so you can lift up your sling plate because that's what locks in the buffer tube. And then you just unscrew the whole thing. So, same gun that had the full buffer tube on it will usually have a cap on the back. You're going to open it up by taking the cap off. This is the lock plate that would keep it in place without allowing it to come out. And then you've got your quick change spring system right there. So now that you're to your quick change plate with this one, just a flathead screwdriver, push in slightly, rotate 90 degrees, your spring guide and spring will come out. So once you've swapped your spring out, put your spring guide back on. You may have to do this by hand because it's going to be a little stubborn. Get it into where it seats, and then you're just going to fully lock it into place. So to put that AR back together with that buffer tube system, you're just going to do everything we just did in reverse. I already put the cap back on. I'm just putting the buffer tube back on now. These are truly quick change springs, considering I'm already basically done other than tightening the castle nut and putting the stock back on. More traditional style, you'll notice there is no access via the back, so we're going to have to take this apart and get the gearbox out. So like any standard barrel swap or maintenance on your gun, you're going to remove this front pin so that you can take the top of the gun off. They can be a little stubborn. The next thing we're taking off is your mag release switch. This is going to be for any AR. These ones will be a little more complicated because it's an ambidextrous one. So it's going to be a little weirder to take apart. Don't lose this spring, it's very important. So the next thing we're taking off this gun is the fire selector. Now if you do not have an ambidextrous fire selector, this will not be necessary. This one does have an ambidextrous one though. So once you have the selector off, if you need to, we're going to lift out. You want to be very careful as there's a tiny little ball bearing on there that you do not want to lose. Now since it was ambidextrous, we had to take off the other side just like the previous side. There's one long one and one short one. Next we're going to take off the motor plate so we can unplug the wires from the motor. So once you have both of the screws out, the plate's going to pop up because this motor's spring loaded. You're going to carefully remove your motor plate, and then what we're looking to do is unplug these two wires and pull the motor out. So once you have the two wires unplugged, pull your motor out, set it aside away from all of your screws and stuff because they're very magnetic. And then in the very bottom of this, I'm going to grab a flashlight so you can see. There's a couple of screws down in the bottom of it. They're Phillips heads, and we'll be removing those next so we can take the grip off. So once you have the two screws out of the bottom, you're going to take the grip off. Be careful not to yank these wires real hard. So you're going to get it out to here, flip it over, and then you're just feeding the wires out of their ports. Next, I'm going to take off the bolt hold open, which is just this little pin here, and then carefully sliding this thing out, which can be a bit of a pain since this one's ambidextrous. Now sometimes this won't come out because the gearbox is sitting too tightly on it, so you're going to just leave it there loose. So next we're going to be taking out the trigger pin. I'm going to use a straight Allen key and a rubber mallet because they are press fit. Now that I've got the trigger pin out, when I said they're single directional and they're press fit, that's all that striping on the end there, keeps it from falling out on you. Now we're going to take out the rear body pin because that should be the last thing holding the gearbox in. Now that I've got the gearbox loose, I'm going to lift it up slightly so that I can start working on getting this out. They can be very stubborn. Next, we're just going to take the gearbox out. Make sure you don't yank any of the wires again. They may get stuck. Once you're here, you'll be ready to change your spring out. Now we're to the reason why they call these a quick change spring, because like the other one, it has the pop-out cap on the back to change your spring out. Now the reason this was invented, at least in this form, was so that you didn't have to completely disassemble the gearbox to change out your spring. So once you've got your new spring in, we're going to put it back together the way we took it apart. However, with these ambidextrous fire selectors, there's one little thing you gotta watch out for. So with these ambidextrous fire selectors, the big problem is these gears, the one on the other side will always fall off, and you have to make sure that that pattern in that hole is aligned on both sides. I'm currently holding that on with my finger. So we showed you how to take this apart and change the spring on it. I know it seems complicated, it really isn't that bad. With some basic tools, usually a 2mm Allen key and a couple of screwdrivers, you can get all this done pretty quickly. It takes about 10-15 minutes. But if you're not comfortable with doing it yourself, take it into your local shop. I'm sure they can do it for you.
Don't be a fool!